Comment tu as le micro pour présenter l'invité, je veux dire. Ok. Ici.
Présente-le là-dessus.
Bonjour à tous. Donc je m'appelle Manon Doz, je fais partie du groupe d'étudiantes de Sciences Po qui a participé à l'organisation de cette conférence. Donc merci beaucoup à l'École du Louvre et merci à Céline Schmidt pour son intervention. Je vais maintenant présenter notre prochain invité en anglais, donc, parce qu'il est américain, donc c'est Amar Bakshi. So our next guest today is Amar Bakshi. Amar studied at Harvard and Yale, and he worked as a reporter at The Washington Post and as an editor at CNN. And he later became special assistant to the US ambassador to the United Nations. But Amar Bakshi is also an innovator as well as an artist. He found a way to unite, physically unite people through art. With his project Portals in 2014, he created a new form of digital and physical space that challenges the notion of distance as we know it. This initiative allowed to connect members of diverse communities, to make people who would never have met otherwise exchange and interact. And this project traveled all around the world, so we feel very privileged to have Amar Bakshi here today with us in Paris. Thank you, Amar.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, thanks, wow. Thank you, thanks for nothing, for having me. And my apologies for not speaking French. I am the worst of an American in that way. But I am very honored to be here, delighted to be among inspirations, and just in the past few minutes, few hours, have felt such an incredible spirit from the team at Thanks for Nothing that I'm very grateful to be a part of it. So, I graduated from college about 13 years ago, and my first job was as a reporter. And I traveled around the world in 2006 to 2008, reporting on how people from all walks of life view the United States. So this was in the era of George W. Bush. It wasn't great. I could only imagine doing it now. And so I spent several years alone on the road. And one of the most powerful experiences that happened frequently was on long bus rides from one part of a country to another. I had no iPhone, my computer would die, and I had 6 hours ahead of me with a stranger sitting next to me and nothing else to do. So out of sheer boredom, I would strike up a conversation with whoever happened to be beside me. And they had nothing to gain from me, I had nothing to gain from them. Our social cues didn't really translate, and we were never going to see each other again. And in those moments, I had some of the most profound, moving conversations of my life about love, loss, sexuality, hope, things that I would never have talked about at home. Now, when I came back to the US, I found that I never talked to people for no particular purpose. I was always talking to someone to get a date or get a job, but not in that way of being lost in the world, of just satiating a very basic human curiosity. Now, the other experience from my years on the road at that time was I went to Lahore, Pakistan, which is where my grandmother fled 60 years before during partition. I was the first member of my family to go to Pakistan, and my grandmother was incredibly curious to know what life was like. She wanted to know what her old bakery felt like, what her old community talked about. And my pieces on art and culture and politics didn't hit that nerve. She was living in Columbia, Maryland at the time. And I said, Nanny, don't worry. One day you'll be able to walk around as a hologram and talk to whoever you want. So she passed away in 2014. And even though the technology was better than ever, there was no context within which she would have had that conversation, the kind of conversation I had. You know, one memory I had from my travels was pen pal letters. I remember people in the Philippines showing me a letter that they had saved from 1980 that was Golding. And even though it's as easy to call Afghanistan as it is to call right down the block, the magic was gone. And it crystallized for me this moment we're in of magic and of loss. magic in technology and the speed of change unlike anything we've ever seen, and loss in community, human dignity, the senses of that we are in control of our own destiny and can shape it. So, at the time that portals came to be, I was in law school and decided that art was the only domain that allowed for the kind of projects I was interested in undertaking. And so I set up Portals as an art project. So let me tell you briefly what Portals is, how it's grown, and then what its relationship is to philanthropy. So Portals are gold shipping containers, not real gold, they're painted gold. They are equipped with immersive AV, so when you enter one, you talk to someone in another one, somewhere else on Earth, like you're in the same room. You don't need to wear goggles or anything, you just come in. Like my grandmother, she would have wanted to walk in and share chai with a stranger. That's sort of what you can do here. Now, she's in Berlin, for example, and he's in Herat, Afghanistan. So it's live, it's full body, and you make eye contact. There are also other forms, inflatables and buses and screens. But what's important is that, I'll tell you just briefly the story. The first portal launched between a gallery in the Lower East Side of New York and a gallery in Tehran, Iran. And people were invited to come in for 20 minutes and talk about daily life. The prompt was, what would make today a good day for you? So I had lots of artist collaborators, Sohrab Kashani from the Sazmanab Gallery in Tehran, artist collaborators in New York, and we set up this space and we set up this context where we thought people would come in, find the technology to be cool, and have a reasonable conversation. What surprised us was the intensity of people's reactions. They came in, they stayed for hours, they brought their grandparents, their students, they did performance art collaborations. Women who didn't dance publicly in Iran were able to dance for an audience in Manhattan. And people started reaching out from around the world saying, I want to place a portal. And one of the first people to reach out was a student in Herat, Afghanistan. He was a computer science professor. And he said, heard about us on BBC Persian and said, when people think about my country, they think about, well, one, they don't know where my city is. Two, they think of the Taliban, or at best, outsourced labor. They outsource coding jobs to us. And so he wanted to set up a portal to showcase the diversity of his own community and to engage people in a non-instrumental way. Engage people not to serve code, but just to come to know. So we told him how to build a portal. He found one, he painted it gold, he set up the technology, and that was our first permanent portal. This was in 2014, 2015. We now have 35 portals around the world, located in very diverse sites, from a contemporary art museum in Mexico City to an internally displaced persons camp in Erbil, Iraq, a tech hub in Gaza City, and an art center in inner city Milwaukee. And each of these portals is staffed full-time by one or two portal curators, whose job it is to be rather like a librarian. So you go as a member of your community to your portal curator and say, I'm interested in art and social projects. I'm interested in coding. I'm interested in just meeting. And your curator will help facilitate the connections. Now, the first way people encounter a portal is there's a random gold shipping container in the middle of their town, and they wonder what it is, and they stumble in, and suddenly they're in Milwaukee talking to someone in Myanmar. But over time, because these are permanent fixtures, we imagine ourselves building a new public utility. So rather like a library that has a librarian who not only provides you the book, but also sparks your interest in reading, we see ourselves doing the same thing with with diversity. So a big picture point on that right now, where we are in the US and abroad, is globalization and diversity have become very dark words in some places. And when you think about why that might be, I think one strong argument is that the benefits of these two things don't accrue to most people. In a lot of sites we are in, people don't leave their zip code, let alone their city, let alone their country ever. And so to them, globalization represents job loss, but not creative gain, not a new potential market, not a source of pleasure, none of the things that it can be for those who are fortunate enough to be here. All right, so That's the big picture. New public utility, extend the benefits of globalization. And briefly, before I go into my thoughts on philanthropy and art, I'll just tell you a little bit of sort of the obvious ways in which we are engaged in worlds that overlap with philanthropy. We are in inner city Milwaukee, which has the highest black male incarceration rate in America, working with folks who have recently come out of jail, working with people who are still in prison. We have a portal in a juvenile detention center. We're with Gaza Sky Geeks, a community in Gaza City that can't leave, obviously. We work with them on projects that they undertake. We're working with the Library of Mosul to rebuild. We're in a girls' coding academy in Herat, Afghanistan. We're a lot of these sites. And we're in a number of Syrian refugee resettlement sites as well. And we, as an organization, have to fund a rather large operation. We have 60 staff around the world, another 10 based in the US. And so philanthropy is a part of how we do that. But, as we do this, we really are very careful to think about how we position our institution as part of this work, as part of this piece. And so when we connect, and it's important to note that every site connects to every other site, when we connect the UN General Assembly to a refugee camp, there are all sorts of assumptions that go into the nature of that pairing in particular. Many of the assumptions, I think, of philanthropy not deeply considered, which is, I want to hear your story. I want to humanize you, the refugee. As opposed to, you have a great deal you can share with me, and I have some things I can share with you. Money is one store of value, but so is experience, so is diversity itself. So we take great pains for our curators and in our network to build a culture that moves away from the over-fetishization of money as a store of value. And this is something we feel interacting, I'll say in the US, with a lot of really wealthy institutions. The assumption is that we're coming there to humanize others, which to me is an extension of just a gaze repurposed in another terminology. So we don't say that. We really push back on that early, and to their credit, people quickly adjust. They quickly say, what I want to learn is this, what I can provide is that. Now, so the other thing we grapple with deeply is our economic structure. So, one piece of this, which is a whole nother talk, is how do you engage the problems of unequal distribution of capital within the piece itself? How do you structure, whether it's investment or salary, how do you think about those things as critically as you would the color of a container or the structure? And what I'd say there is it's very tempting, it's very easy to think, well, we are going to, what many people will say to us, monetize our technology, build an enterprise, and use the funding to sponsor the art piece. That is the traditional reaction of many people, to which I think, and I think many artists think, well, that isn't the point, right? The point is to actually think as critically about what it is we're trying to build economically as it is experientially, as it is structurally. So, we can talk about this at some other time. We have funding from a variety of different sources that range from philanthropies to revenue-generating activities of all kinds, corporations, cities, and with all of these, they raise the same challenges, right? With corporations, are we a form of papal indulgence? Are we doing clean climate work for an oil company? With governments, do we work with governments who use us, but at the same time jail their dissidents for creative expression? These are things we wrestle with constantly. But I think it would be useful here to mention what we wrestle with in philanthropies, because that's the topic of this conversation. And so I will briefly turn to that, and then after telling you what I wrestle with philanthropies and what we wrestle with as a collective piece, mention a couple of the ways forward that excite us. So the most obvious kind of critique of philanthropy is that it's a way the wealthy bypass the democratic process. And the language of this is very much rooted in the language of the technocratic, efficient elite. You see this a lot in Silicon Valley as an extreme example, which is these are technical problems we need to solve, whether it's hunger or you name it. We're better at doing it than bureaucracies, so let us get a tax advantage to allocate our exceptional skills towards the resolution of this problem. Problem with that, of course, is it can undercut democracy. It can undercut people's willingness, especially in art, to see it as something that they control and have stakes in. And it can create this us versus them mentality where the art establishment feels antagonistic again, feels to be in a conflict with people who say, oh, art is valuable. And that debate gets so reduced to such absurdity so quickly that I don't want to dwell in it. But the point is, there's an obligation at all points not to forget that art must play this critical role in a democracy, assuming, which I think many of us still do, that that's the best form of government with lots of tweaks that so far we've been able to create. The second thing is thinking a little bit about how philanthropy can not undercut actors in a space, but can be the soil in which new seeds can grow rather than a full tree. And this, I think, is very important in a couple ways, and I'll just briefly note it. There is return to investing in and supporting institutions that have succeeded. It's a safer bet. The quality is there. But it also sometimes, and I think as a result, we sometimes overcorrect towards that space rather than the riskier investments at very, very small levels in artists, even without administrative oversight. So I would just say that, just note that as a feature we've seen as we've gone out and sought grants. And just to kind of frame that, how I would frame that positively, or what I really mean by this is, there's such a pressure these days to frame problems in ways that can be solved technocratically and not politically. That's changing, but there's a language that so often is adopted that makes the problems also very, very tight, very easily definable, as opposed to ones that are completely interconnected, intersectional. And that has a profound depoliticization embedded in it. One of the powers of portals, I've found, is that people sitting in inner city Milwaukee are stunned to find that they share similar challenges as people are not only in Mumbai, which is true, but even in Newark, halfway across the country. So I want to, because I don't want to run out of time, I want to do two quick things. I think I think I'm okay. Okay, good. Okay, great. I'm going to show you a video so you can see what portals are, so I just wanted to make sure I had 3 minutes for that, and then if we have a few minutes for questions, or feel free to just raise your hand if helpful. The big picture on this here for me is art can, and with philanthropy's help, can take risks that other sectors don't. And those risks can serve as models for the democratic process. So what does that mean in practice? Well, I think with fondness of artists today and artists, especially in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, maybe I just read about them so I have a fondness, a special fondness because of that process of reading, but who sought utopian projects, who sought overhaul change, who were, big and brash in their goals. And as we know, generally, we don't have a ton of communes running around, but that scale of ambition, that scale of wanting to build a new structural entity, of not contenting oneself with narrow cast victories, but instead dreaming big constantly, I really don't see where, if artists don't do that, it gets done in our social formation today. And I really don't see where artists alone can do this without the insights of philanthropists who have succeeded, almost by definition, in our contemporary system, but recognize that this cannot be how we live forever. And little improvements, even big improvements, are probably not enough to satisfy something that many of us feel is a loss in our contemporary life. So let me show a quick video, and then if we have a minute or two,
Portals is about really
Sorry.
No, it's okay. And I apologize for this video because it involves me, but we don't have another overview video yet. That's good.
curating the diversity of the world and bringing the benefits of that diversity to people from all walks of life. I'm Amar Bakshi. I'm the founder and creator of Shared Studios. We take shipping containers, we paint them gold, and we equip them with immersive audio-visual technology. We're in a world where people are retreating into their own little bubbles. They see and hear things that are given to them, but don't often get the chance to talk to someone halfway around the world, or talk to someone who they hear about all the time.
Through portals, you can connect with people that you're separated from due to distance and really learn about their realities in a very simple way, through a simple conversation.
We have 30 portals around the world, and every portal connects to every other portal in the network. When you enter one, you come face to face with someone in an identical portal somewhere else on Earth and can converse live, full body, as if in the same room. When people come in, they often describe feeling as though they're breathing the same air. Kids think they can walk up through the wall and hug the person on the other end.
Being in the Portal Project has kind of changed my life. I think it's just starting world peace.
It's as diverse as our sites are. From a refugee camp in Erbil, Iraq,
give us a lot of information about how's the life, how's the situation,
to a tech hub in Gaza City, Palestine,
We're gonna eat.
to a modern art museum in Mexico City.
No matter how far away we are, we can still be brothers and sisters.
Our portal in Kigali, Rwanda is at a community art space.
I think this is an awesome opportunity to connect Rwanda to the rest of the world.
And we just launched a portal in Times Square. And every day we have everything from strangers talking about daily life, to ongoing classes, to global performances, dance-offs, rap albums, and to sharing entrepreneurial ideas.
We could bend spaces and create this wonderful experience to connect people in different parts of the world.
We had President Obama come and speak to social entrepreneurs in South Korea, Iraq, the UK, and Mexico.
It's an amazing technology, making it seem like you're standing right in front of me.
We've now had 75,000 people come through and have these conversations. And they all talk about how powerful it is to focus your attention on hearing the stories of someone else.
We want this to happen all over the world for everybody. Any location can really be a portal as long as it has internet and a source of electricity.
No matter where you are, who you are, we want to hear from you, and we want to work with you to put a portal in your community. Because with every new site, we grow more diverse, more dynamic, and ever more valuable together.